Dina, it's Eventbrite, so whatever I sent you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Richmond, Virginia. I'm glad that you're here. My name is Charlie, and I'm the rector of St. Paul's. Would you please join me as we begin with a prayer? Almighty God, we give you thanks for the gift and the beauty of this day, for the gift and the beauty of community, of relationship, of creativity, and of beauty. And God, we come to you in a strange season when people are suffering and sick. And we lift them up to you now, up to your healing light. We also lift up those members of our medical community who are attending to those who are ill. Continue to extend to them compassion and understanding and patience. Thank you for the gift of life. And in all that we do, may we always seek to bring peace and wholeness and health to your planet and to all of your people. We pray these things for the sake of your love. Amen. All right, again, welcome to the 2021 Lenten Speaker Series at St. Paul's Episcopal Church. As you know, typically we would gather here in this beautiful sanctuary. We would have a delicious lunch. We'd come together for a short worship service, and we would come to hear our speakers. And this year is clearly different. And it was very obvious when the design team came together that we wanted to focus our attention this year on artists, on poets. And we were also very clear that we wanted to focus our attention on the theme of the journey, because we have indeed been on a journey in this last year. Almost a year ago, the churches began to shut down here in Richmond. So we've learned a lot. The theme of journey is huge in the Bible. And in this series, we're going to hear different artists speak about their own journeys. We've heard Hamilton, we've heard Tanya, and tonight we're going to hear from Spencer. Dave Coogan is here again to move with us through this conversation. You are no stranger to Dave now. He is a teacher, he is a member of St. Paul's, and he is dedicated to helping others find their own voice and express their own journeys, having done a lot of creative work with incarcerated persons and in the jail system. So Dave's ministry is vital. If you have any questions tonight, please put them in the Q&A, and I will make certain that we get to as many of them as we can. We have some questions and a pattern that we hope to move through tonight, but we also want to make sure your voice is heard. So thank you all for being here. Let's let tonight's journey begin. Dave, over to you.
All right. Well, I am pleased to introduce to you tonight our featured speaker, Spencer Reece. Spencer Reece is a published poet. He's the author of The Clerk's Tale from 2004 and The Road to Emmaus, 2014. He is also an Episcopal priest, presently serving as priest in charge at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Jackson Heights, New York City, where he conducts services in both English and Spanish. After a career in retail clothing, Spencer was ordained a priest in 2011. While at Berkeley Divinity School at Yale, he studied Spanish in an immersion program in Honduras, returning after graduation to teach poetry to girls in the orphanage, Our Little Roses in San Pedro Sula, Honduras. Quote, "I went there to help the girls heal, and they helped to heal me," says Reece. From an undergraduate study of poets George Herbert and John Donne to his present work as a writer and priest, Reece affirms the connection of the arts and spiritual life. His book of daily meditations, including his own watercolor illustrations, All the Beauty Still Left, is scheduled for release in 2021. And his latest book, The Secret Gospel of Mark, a poet's memoir, will also be released later this year if it is not out already. So welcome, Spencer Reece.
Thank you, David. Thank you, all of you, Charlie and Sarah, who's helping with all the technical stuff. And I'm looking at that sanctuary and that church, and it's just such an extraordinary building and sanctuary. I'm honored to be here. I'm flattered that you asked me to be here, and it's a great joy for myself and my dog, Mr. Coconut, who's here in the office with me. He's sleeping. He went back to sleep, but he said he would like to introduce himself as we're closing, so I'll be sure to get him on.
We will all look forward to Mr. Coconut's appearance at the closing hour. You've promised now, so I hope Mr.
Yeah, no,
Coconut...
he's more interesting and better looking than I am, so he gets a lot of attention.
So, Spencer, as you know, we've been embarking on a collective journey this Lent together, as Charlie mentioned in his introduction. And we know that as an artist, as a priest, as a poet, you're no stranger to that process of journeying. And we thought we might, if we could, can we start there and ask you to
Yes.
say a little bit more about your journey? What are the kinds of questions that you've been asking yourself, and how have they come through in your work, your painting and your poetry?
That is a good question. Often the question I ask myself is, how did I get here? Sometimes I even ask myself that when I'm in the pulpit about to deliver a sermon. I suddenly think, how did this happen to me? It seems sometimes unconscious. It seems we had a huge and a beautiful funeral here. About beautiful is not the right word, but it was elegant. It was what the Episcopal Church does best, that I officiated for. I think it was a week ago, and the man who lost his daughter was very moved by the story that I shared with him in this office, of the Road to Emmaus, which is the title of my that second book of poems you mentioned that came out a long time ago now. And I love that story because it's a journey. I love the story of the Road to Emmaus because Cleopas and the unnamed disciple, we don't know if that unnamed disciple is a woman. We don't know who it is, which is lovely. The Bible is lovely, laden with mystery. And they are they're unsure. They're full of doubt. They kind of don't know what just happened, and they don't know where they're going. And that has been my journey from the beginning. The two books that you've asked me to talk about tonight, which are both coming out right now at the time that the vaccines are dropping. One is an autobiography that was 18 years in the making, called The Secret Gospel of Mark. My first name is Mark. The name of this church is Mark. No coincidences, right? So that very specifically catalogs my chronological journey from birth. I was born on August 27th, 1963. That's where my journey began. Remember what happened that day? This would be good for your church to know. I know you're dealing with racial reconciliation. So on August 27th, 1963, Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And that's the day that I came out of my beloved mother. And that book tracks my journey up until more or less present. And then the other book to discuss tonight is this watercolor book that just came out of nowhere during the pandemic. I had been painting pictures for about 30 years, but they had never been public. When the pandemic started, I had left Europe. My mother had a massive stroke. I was suddenly back in the United States after 10 years of not being here. And then the pandemic happened, and I was with my disabled mother and my father in a very small apartment. And I began painting pictures so I wouldn't go out of my mind. And then I put them on Facebook, and then out of nowhere, that book got picked up and made into a book. And so it's like a book of hours. And I know we have 2 images to show. I can talk about those. The title of that book is called All the Beauty Still Left. One of my earliest literary influences, speaking of my journey, was when I was at an Episcopal prep school in Minneapolis, and there we go. I was exposed to the Diary of Anne Frank, and it was very inspiring to me and resonated with me at the time of the pandemic as well. All that she and her family went through in hiding. And in that diary, which we are so lucky to have, and we only have because Otto Frank survived, everybody else died. Otto Frank went back to the apartment, found the diary hidden, and we have this amazing work. And in the diary, she said, "Think of all the beauty still left and be happy." So the title of this devotional book is called "Think All the Beauty Still Left." So this image I did just one day in Old Lyme, where my parents live, and I think my journey, to highlight that word again, is very filled with grace and accident. And I think that's why I like watercolors, because like I remember doing this image and it sort of happened accidentally. Like the water in there, I think that's the best thing I ever did in a picture, where it looks like it's the moon is reflecting on the water in Long Island Sound. And that was an accident, that the brush didn't cover the whole thing at once. And before I went back over it, I left it, and I thought, gosh, that's pretty good. So
It has a lot of yearning in it to me as I look at it. Were you looking out from your home, your parents' home in Lyme, out to the water? Were you
um,
thinking about your life back in where you had just come from?
oh, sure. I was thinking about so many things. My parents live in a nice little apartment, and you go down the road, and I went down there every day with Mr. Coconut to go look at the water and talk to God and try to understand what was happening to the world. And and this comes from walking and thinking. Yeah.
Right. Were you reflecting back on your mother, her, and what was happening in her life as well?
Sure, I because it was a very concentrated amount of time with my mother, like Anne Frank had with her parents. We were thrown together by circumstance, and yeah, I thought about her whole life, and the life of a woman from the 1950s, and how courageous she had been in many ways.
Hmm. we've
So
all.
Spencer, what was that like? One of the things we've encountered, and as a priest, I know you know this, is that the pandemic has made it really hard for people to care for each other in some situations. Sometimes people can't be together physically. And then sometimes people are thrown together in such a way that they can't be apart. So I wonder if you just might comment on what it's been like for you to have this really intense relationship with your parents.
Well, I think, it, I mean, I love them so much. Um, so, um, I love them so much. It's not easy as humans to cohabitate for any of us. I don't know what it's like for you, but I mean, it's always a challenge. I lived very humbly in Madrid for the years before I came to Jackson Heights, before they invited me to come here. And I have to tell you, I mean, one of the things I was most excited about coming to Jackson Heights was I was going to get my own bathroom because for all my years in Madrid, which was also a blessing, I lived with a Spanish family and we shared the bathroom in the kitchen. So, I mean, this forced me into Spanish like nobody's business. When you're sharing a bathroom and a kitchen with a family, you can't hide. And so, the time with my parents is precious, and it's very challenging sometimes because my mother has a part of her is gone, and that's very sad. When somebody has she had the stroke, and then the pandemic came, and so my parents, one of the gifts is that I have watched a very long term marriage, two people that were decent, that abided. So I think you don't see that all the time
Yeah.
anymore. And so that's a real gift that I was able to see that. It also drove me crazy because my parents sort of we drive each other crazy, to be for full disclosure. So with my dog, Mr. Coconut, my mother would say, God, that dog looks so tired. Are you sure? Are you sure it needs to have another walk? And I'm like, oh no, he needs another walk because I needed to get out of our very small apartment, which is another reason it reminded me of Anne Frank. If you've ever been to Amsterdam, to the hiding place where the family lived for over 2 years, it was a very, very small space. And the space that I lived with my parents for 8 months was small.
Yeah. Maybe I think you've got a picture of your parents,
Oh yeah,
right?
so right, so we could go to that image. This is the last image of that book, and each image is accompanied by a quote. And so the quote for this image is from Maurice Sendak, who wrote Where the Wild Things Are. And
Mhm.
Maurice Sendak says, "But the wild things cried, 'Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so.'"
Mm.
Mm.
So
That's
that's
touching.
Mr. Coconut. That's your first preview shot of Mr. Coconut. That's my dad and my mom, and for most of those 8 months, I put them to bed because my mother's going to be 89. She's fully disabled. She can't walk. She cannot go to the bathroom on her own anymore. And we had aides that started to come to the house. But for many weeks, I was cleaning my own mother, which is quite a humbling, full circle spiritual thing.
Mm.
Yes. There's something compelling about that quote and listening to you reflect on them and seeing the picture. Don't go, we'll eat you. Our love will consume you.
Yeah.
And there's something about that that I find really compelling, especially for all of us in the pandemic season. We are in close quarters. We all are learning to see each other in a different way because our love is not just from a distance on our choice, but butting up against each other in and out of those shared spaces, like you described yourself in Madrid. And that's something that I wondered about when you described your journey into the priesthood, but also into becoming a poet. Because I know you weren't always like this. You had another whole life, and
Yeah.
another. I think I mentioned it in the bio, in retail. Was that your?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I worked at Brooks Brothers for 12 years. I was in sales and management. I was the number one seller. A glory I give to God, but I was the number one seller there. I started in Minnesota. I sold $500,000 worth of product in 1997, went out the door with my name on it. And then I did that. And then after a couple of years, I went into management. It again to underscore the word accidental. I never meant to work there ever, but I was up against a rock and a hard place. I needed a job, and my parents were facing enormous financial reversals and bankruptcy, and I had been somewhat entitled and attached to them in maybe ways that weren't so healthy, some of them financial. And so at that moment, I I needed a job and I got one in the Mall of America. I thought it was going to be for Christmas, and I was there 12 years.
Hmm.
And but the thing I guess important in the whole story is I had gone to divinity school when I was young, but I was full of doubt and I didn't know if I could do this thing, be a minister. George Herbert was the idol of my life, a poet, a 17th century poet. I wanted to be just like him. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that was my dream. My parents supported it, and uh, it kind of never left me. And so I spent a lot of time in the real world, in the rough tumble world of the rag trade, and then this book of poems that I had been working on for 15 years that was rejected over 300 times won a contest when I was 41 years old. Louise Glick was the judge who went on to she just became the what do you call it? No, but no, yeah, the what is it, that thing in Sweden? She got the Nobel Prize. She
Nobel.
got the Nobel Prize. So anyway,
That.
she that thing. So she had selected my book, and that changed my life. And I stayed in retail. I think another 5 years. I prayed. I meditated. I was going to church more. I started volunteering at hospice, and I talk about all this in this memoir book. And then I felt the call to go back, and I went back to school at 44, and took all the classes, took everything again, and that's
I,
where I met Reverend Rainey Dankel, who you are so lucky to have in your church. Oh my God, she was the smartest person in the whole shooting match. So we had our Bible study, and I passed those exams because she was in my Bible study.
Yay, Rainy.
hey, this seems like a great time for you to read something about that call to poetry and to reclaiming your
Okay.
roots with your divinity degrees. Any of that would be wonderful to hear.
Okay. Um, let's see. Um, I'll find something short here. Um, this is when Louise Glick entered my life. Does that sound like a good thing? I was in retail, and I'll, hopefully I brought my reading glasses. I think. Oh, I did. I did. Good. We're in luck. Okay. This is Devotion 72. This is Louise Glick has entered my life, and I can't believe it. I'm working at Brooks Brothers, and my life is about to change completely. Phone calls began. Louise Glick became Louise quickly. Ring, ring. Hello, is that you? Yes, it is I, Louise said. Louise spoke in a unique manner. Cultivated, northeastern, there was something unusual in her cadence. She never said, She spoke in fully formed, complete, complex, laser-like sentences. Her tone was the sound of brilliant originality and unrolled from the phone like ticker tape. Can you hear the cars on the street? Like ticker tape. My own English tightened to keep up. She spoke, I took notes. Had Gabriel swooped in wearing golden robes to take up residence in my stable? Usually we would go for 2-hour stretches. Sometimes I simply wanted to know more about poetry, the world of it. What do you think of this poet? I'd tentatively ask. Tell me about that poet, I'd beg. She told me she had just run into Mark Strand and that he'd just gotten back from Madrid, where he'd fallen in love. Traveling to Europe, let alone falling in love, these possibilities shook my brain's confines, which had been groomed into submission by over a decade in retail. Mistakenly, are you getting a sound of Jackson Heights out my priest window? It's great. Mistakenly or not, I'd felt my world limited to folding seminars, time clocks, no time to date, and only 3 weeks of accrued vacation, which could not be taken all at one time. Now, in these conversations, which were the opposite of gossip, which I might call illumination, poets I'd met only in word were becoming flesh. Possibilities were filling my guest bedroom as if it was a crowded airport lounge. Louise welcomed me. It's just a little bit.
And it released you from where you thought you were stuck.
Oh, it was biblical. I mean, I wouldn't have used that word then, but yeah, I couldn't believe it had happened because I've been rejected so many times, and I thought the contests were rigged. You had to know somebody in academia, you had to have an MFA, and I just had I just had folding seminars and a lot of time in retail, and well, it just the miraculous and the unbelievable can happen to anybody because it happened to me.
Can you share with us the poem that won that contest that Louise noticed?
Well, it was a book. It was a
Oh,
book.
okay. The whole book of poetry.
Yeah, it was a book of poetry that was called The Clerk's Tale that was published in 2004. And it was a whole collection of poems that I'd worked on for over 15 years. And the title poem, The Clerk, was this fellow that I worked with, whose name was Ralph. And it was kind of an homage to people that weren't being seen. You know, I felt like the sales clerks, the work we did, nobody noticed us. And Ralph was this amazing salesperson, and I wanted to honor him. So he was alive to see that happen, and it ran in the New Yorker. It was pretty exciting for him. So, and for me.
Hey, David, I wonder if we can hear about, you went to Honduras
I did.
to teach poetry
I did.
at an
Yeah,
orphanage.
I did.
And one of the things that you mentioned is that you went to teach them, but they taught you. So I wonder if you can just talk about that experience. Number one, why did you do that? Why did you go down to teach? Why is poetry important? Why did they need to learn poetry? And what did they teach you?
Oh, Charlie, you ask good questions.
Thank you.
Oh, you guys are lucky to have Charlie at your church. I hope you know that. I don't even know him, but I like him already. Um,
Yes.
I think it was again accidental, really. I mean, Rainey can also remember this because she was a witness to all of this that happened. But I went, going to Honduras was a complete accident. I wanted to learn Spanish. I was doing CPE for those in the church business, clinical pastoral education, right? Is that what it stands for?
That
At
is.
Hartford Hospital. There was a lot of gang violence. There was a lot of people that weren't speaking English. And I just felt I needed to learn Spanish. And so through my bishop in Miami, I little did I know that his wife was this like powerhouse that had founded this orphanage only for girls about 30 years ago. And Desmond Tutu had put the first shovel in the ground. I mean, it's called Our Little Roses. It's a miraculous, amazing place. And so the bishop said, I know. I said, I need to learn Spanish. He said, I know just the place. I said, where is that? He said, Honduras. I said, where is that? He said, it's in Central America. I was like, where is that? You know, I was very, very clueless. And so I arrived in Honduras, which is the poorest Spanish speaking country in the Western Hemisphere, a white boy who'd gone to Wesleyan and Harvard and was now at Yale. And I had grown up in a nice suburb in Minneapolis. I don't even think we thought of Minneapolis as segregated, but after the murder of George Floyd, I think everybody's had to reconsider that. And I didn't know, I can't swear on this thing. I'm not going to swear on this. I didn't know anything. And so that began my education in so many things. And well, it was just life changing. What was your question again? That's how I got there.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, the poet was last week, her name was Tanya Olson. The question I asked her is why poetry? Why does poetry matter?
Okay, okay.
So I'd love
So
to hear you talk about
I'll
that.
tell you. So this is why poetry. So I was there 2 months. I could hardly speak Spanish. It takes a long time. I'm still learning how to speak Spanish. And after 2 months, a woman said to me, "¿Qué tal?" which means "How are you?" I didn't even understand what she was saying. That's 2 months in. So I was getting ready to leave, go back to Yale, New Haven. I felt very out of place. I thought, I'm never coming back to this place again. Like, I don't know what I've been doing here for 2 months. They're burning plastic over the fence. Guns are going off. It's hot all the time. I don't belong here. They don't need me. There are other people to do this kind of work here. What am I doing here? I'm frustrated that I'm not learning any Spanish. This is going to take longer than I thought. And there was a young girl named Gwendolyn who was standing in my doorway. I had packed my suitcases. She was standing in the doorway, which was odd because it was bedtime curfew, so they were all supposed to be in bed. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "We heard you're leaving tomorrow." And I was taken aback because I didn't think they even knew I was there. I mean, I had a hard time communicating with them. I was weird. I was tall. I was, you know. Um, so she said, "No, we heard you're leaving tomorrow." And I said, "Okay." And then she wouldn't leave. And I said, "Is there something you want to say to me?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Don't forget us," is what she said. Or in Spanish, "No nos olvides." She left. I closed my door and the waterworks started. I was crying. I thought, why am I, what's going on with me? And I was very disturbed that all these little people were thinking that they were going to be forgotten. That was disturbing to me. And I was also slowly becoming a priest, but I didn't know where my ministry was going to go. And somehow that never left my head that she said that. And so I applied for a Fulbright. And I thought, well, the best way I could remember these girls is to get them to write poetry. And because that's the thing I know. I don't know much, but I know a little something about that because I've spent a lot of years reading it, loving it, writing it. So what if I went back and I got them to write poems from themselves? So that's what I did. And then it became a movie. It's a beautiful movie that's on Amazon Prime called Voices Beyond the Wall. It's free if you have Amazon Prime. It's a good activity during the pandemic. And it's just the filmmakers that came together for that were brilliant.
Yeah.
The editor worked for Woody Allen. He's not so popular right now, but she was the editor. And she was an orphan from Mexico, believe it or not. And she did the editing for that film. And if you get to see the film, that's why it's so tender and beautiful. And as Rainey said to me, like a reverse mission. It's a whole story of a reverse mission, which is I was changed.
Yeah.
Voices from Beyond the Wall?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's the title in English. It's Las Chavas. It's also in Spanish too. It's in both.
Yeah. I notice, Spencer, both talking about those girls and also talking about your mother, that you got emotional thinking about people leaving, or you leaving, or in some way
Mm.
there's going to be a change or a part. Is that something that you've been working on in your ministry and in your poetry? Is understanding how to deal with change, or with attachment, or with, I mean, it's
Well, there's no getting away from it, is there? I mean, we're changing all the time, and we just last. I am preaching to beat the band here. I feel like I'm in a baseball cage. You know, every Sunday the baseball is coming at me in Spanish and English. And last week it was Jesus and the turning over the tables. And my theme was sort of, changes. We don't always like it, but you can't avoid it. And we're always changing. And I suppose there's a melancholy quality to me and to my life because I've lived so many, many places. And my parents, who I first knew as quite affluent, lost their monetary possessions. And so there's this kind of sense you can't maybe it was a great gift for ministry because you all the physical things are they're going to go. You can't hang on to them, and they really don't. It's probably best if they don't define who you are, your stuff. And so I mean, I just get emotional about my mom, I guess, because she's my mom. But and in seminary at they called me there's first responders, there's also wet responders. People arrive at the scene in tears. So
I think
Dave,
it's
I had a couple of questions from the congregation, if
okay,
you will.
okay. Yeah,
Was
yeah.
it okay? I want to get just a few of those in.
Yes.
One person wants to know about the connection of your art and writing with your spirituality and ministry. And then there's another person that notices that you use the word accidental a lot.
Yeah, I did.
So I just wonder, maybe talk about those two things. Like, is part of your spirituality accidental?
Well, again, I relate to that story of those two create those two humans on the road to Emmaus, and I love that they're kind of stumbling as they leave Jerusalem. And it served me well not to know too much and to trust God where I'm being led. Honduras and then Madrid, which was like, what am I doing? And then even Jackson Heights, I mean, I just had to trust that God was leading me. God is leading me to the right place. And I feel confident and not accidental when I know that it's not my idea in a way. I mean, I have desires, I have wishes, I'm tremendously driven and in a way, but with the ministry, I've just tried to let God lead me, which is meaning that I wouldn't lead by my own will, which is tricky. But I've been happy that way, I think, for the most part. Um, I have used the word accidental a lot. I think a lot of things have kind of fallen that way organically, or I'm very open to suggestions and people and incorporating that into my ministry. And somebody will say something, I'll just surprise them and just run with it. And um, how does my spirituality and the arts intersect, I think was the other question. And well, um, I think that writing and painting pictures feeds my soul, and I go into another part of my brain and I have a sense of solace, and it's more like meditation, some kind of meditation and prayer. Um, I'm somewhat circumspect to bring my own works into my job. I mean, I'm not referencing my own poems from the pulpit. That would be kind of makes me cringe. I guess I keep them a little bit separate. We did start this Red Door poetry series at Jackson Heights. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble, but I think yesterday there were more people in there than there are on Sunday. I'm like, oh my god, but that's exciting. We're just all different poets are reading a poem. Then there's 10 minutes of silence, and that's really an outreach to the neighborhood that's secular. I mean, I was talking to a out lesbian Muslim woman who's a poet who came. She'd never been in the church before in her life, so it's kind of exciting. um, Here's one thing else that I was just on the phone today with Canada because they've asked me to take the thing in Jackson Heights and bring it to Vancouver, which is crazy. This poetry thing. It's gonna be I'm gonna take my show on the road to Canada, and the guy that's the dean of the cathedral there was the first priest I ever worked with in Westerly, Rhode Island. And when I went to work at that church, we had 3 minutes to decide what I would do as a deacon. And again, I was like, I don't want to do Sunday school. So I said, let's have a poetry group. And he was like, okay. So this poetry group is still going on. And there were old Episcopalians that would come to that poetry group 12 years ago. And because we were talking about a poem and it wasn't a church service, I remember specifically a woman who has gone to the great Episcopal liturgy in the sky, was able to speak freely about the grief of the loss of her husband because we were talking about a poem. She was able to enter it because we were talking about something else. So,
And I think that's something that you've been doing consistently throughout. I mean, I've just met you, but I think you're somebody who's compelled to witness, and you don't seem to be incapable, or you seem to be incapable of turning away from people whose stories might be forgotten or whose voices might be silenced. And you started it from the beginning with the Clerk's Tale. And I thought, as we're moving through our discussion, if you could read some of your poems. This also came up in our Q&A. Uh,
oh,
some people would love to hear you read some of those poems. Perhaps you could select some where you are remembering people who are overlooked or forgotten. It could be from Honduras. It could be from earlier in your life. It could be more
You
recent
know
life.
what's funny? I don't have my poems with me. I can read you the end of the memoir. It's prose again, but that's about my mom. I was thinking to read that. I don't, or I guess I could find them on the internet, right? That's how you find things, right?
How about
Uh,
you read from your memoir? You said your memoir dropped yesterday. It just came
yeah,
out, right?
yeah. It did. So I
Read
could.
from that.
Do you want me to close with that? Is there any other question you want me to answer before I close with that? Are we at
No,
the end of our time? I
we're
can't.
getting there, but why don't you read and then we'll chat a little bit more and then we'll
Okay.
close it out.
Okay. Well, to David's point, um, which is an interesting observation about picking up on unobserved people. You know that famous quote from Arthur Miller's brilliant play, Death of a Salesman. Willie Loman's just lost the interview. Um, he realizes, the American dream is not going to happen for him, and uh, I still find it very poignant. And so Willie Loman's wife comes to the front of the stage, and she says, "Attention must be paid." So this is about my mom. It's the closing of the book. It takes from John, from the 7 last words, "It is finished." And I was with her in rehab for 6 weeks, and then we brought her home. And I'll read that. It's just 2 pages. It is finished. John chapter 19, verse 30. Mom came home for Christmas. We'd been practicing transferring her from the bed to the commode to the shower with questionable success. Dad cleaned her up and wiped her behind every morning and afternoon and night. Sometimes my brother and I lifted her, sometimes we wiped her behind. Diapers were stacked around the bed, and plastic sheets were on the mattress. Often now she said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." We shushed her. The old lime apartment, piled with countless books, was a snow globe turned upside down, all of us shaken and the world blurry. Some light inside my mother dimmed. She was there mostly, but a part of her had gone. Where had it gone? Was it in heaven? Christ said it was harder for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. One of the gates into Jerusalem was referred to as, quote, the eye of the needle. But it doesn't matter. Every reader thinks of the improbable visual of a camel trying to slip through a tiny hole like thread. This phrase of Jesus's, "How will we get to heaven? Who will get there? Does heaven exist?" George Herbert wasn't overly concerned about it in his poems. Emily Dickinson wrote, quote, "Instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going all along." Was heaven there with me and my father and brother in that bleak Connecticut winter as we drew near to our mother? Before I sent the landlady her money, she wrote and said my parents' rent was in arrears when I arrived from Madrid, and I had been told that they were going to be on the street, that they were going to be evicted when she was in the hospital. Before I sent the landlady her money, she wrote and suggested I take out a loan to pay the back rent. She did not ask about my mother. A friend from Florida said, "Don't worry, she'll get her money." Emily Dickinson again. "'Tis not that dying hurts us so, 'tis living hurts us more." The world had hurt us. The world would hurt us, but we had one another. The term little entrance in the Greek Orthodox Church describes when the priest comes forward to read the gospel. With such an entrance, we spy some chink of eternity. Words spoken break open the world. Many little entrances exist. A poet reading his or her poems is a little entrance. The circles of AA and Al-Anon in church basements, those meetings had little entrances. Someone opened their mouth and everything changed. Those little entrances led me back to the church. Nowadays, a sermon or a liturgy, incense, a soprano soloist, or a needle-pointed kneeler assures me that I am loved, that the world is watched. Not always, but often. Emily Dickinson. I never spoke with God nor visited in heaven, yet certain am I of the spot. The spot of God with my mom was small, yet bright. I held her veiny hand, which was cold. My devotions were closing. I'd come full circle. I finished where I started. Stars were nailed in that cold New England sky. We had come to our little entrance. I love you, Mom, I said. I love you too, darling, my mother said. The words garbled as she wept. Her mouth hanging down where once it had gone up at the sight of me. Mom had changed, but there was hope. Mom looked smaller in the wheelchair we'd found at the thrift store, delicate as a baby in a creche. Oh, we were tired that Christmas, Dad, my brother, me. I'd bought a Christmas tree. The needle and sap smell filled the house, but not one of us had the energy for decorations or lights. The great green dead tree filled the house with life. We were night watchmen after long shifts. Or three kings who'd taken a long journey to see a savior. The end.
Beautiful, Spencer.
Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing that. I love the way it all comes together. I love those images. I think it's very hopeful. I know it's sad, but I think it's also hopeful, an opening
Yeah.
when there's a closing. And isn't that always how it is? It's the perspective that we take on it, which is I think why I said earlier that I think you're just driven to witness. You seem built that way. You don't know how to turn away from even the smallest moments. Another person would have paid the rent in arrear and then gone off. Another person would have never come back to teach those girls who said, "Don't forget us." So I think it's a testament to your character and your kind of glorious big ministry.
Oh, well, I heard Katharine Hepburn in an interview with, remember what's his name, Dick Cavett, who used to do these great interviews, and you can see everything on your phone now. And she said she woke up every day terrified, but that she would just go forward and do it because she knew what she wanted to do. And I identified with that, that a lot of these things have been terrifying for me, and scary, but I guess it's faith. Including St. Mark's here in Jackson Heights. I just had no idea what I was getting into. It's a church that's had a lot of grief. The priest died of COVID. The church was closed. It's a lot of grief, but and I'm new and they don't know me, and I'm strange and weird again, like I was in Honduras and Madrid and all the other places. So, but I know at this point in my life that God sent me here, and I don't know what it means. I don't know how long I'm here. None of us know that, but I know I'm in the in the right place. So it's a nice thing that you said about witness. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Spencer, is there a particular prayer that holds you or sustains you?
I love Psalm, is that 121, where the God will watch your coming in and you're going out. Oh God, that's so good.
Hmm.
I love Thomas Merton's prayer, which sort of speaks to that accidentalness. Oh Lord, I do not know where I am going. I hope you, I hope you are pleased, and I hope I'm doing your will. I don't know if I'm doing your will, but I hope.
Desire to please you pleases you.
Yeah, I love that thing.
Yeah.
When my first book of poems was published and that whole turning of the world happened to me in Palm Beach, the first thing I did was book a flight to Gethsemane, and I went to be with the monks because I knew my life was going to change. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I had to go there. So
Yeah.
he's a hero for me. Yeah.
Well, we need to wind up our time. I feel like I feel like I've known you forever. I think that's the way you roll, as Dave said.
Oh, this was so fun. Yeah, I want to see your church. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, come sometimes and you can preach. Now, look, everybody, in the chat is a link and the names of Spencer's books. As he said, his memoir was released just yesterday. So please, and that's where he read that beautiful story about his mother. I'll never forget that. Okay, well, look, there you go.
Wow, there you go. There it is.
Spencer, thank you for being here. Over the past couple of weeks, people have found out that you were going to be here, and they're like, oh, Spencer, love Spencer, Spencer. And they're right. So, and you are a poem. Your life is a poem. So thanks for sharing it with us.
Don't we have fortunate lives, Charlie? And
oh, yes,
we get to be priests. I mean, some days it seems maybe challenging or difficult, but most days I'm here, I just think, oh, I'm so lucky that I get to be here.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Yeah. There are moments that just catch you like, wow, this is what I've been called to do. And it's quite beautiful. All right. Well,
good luck with all the racial reconciliation work at your church there. I know you're involved in that, and that's brave and admirable.
It's the congregation was set on that journey before I got here. A lot of work has been done and continues to be done. So, all right, you all. Dave, thank you again for leading us through this. I appreciate it. How's school going for you?
Hey, it's a journey. It's all on Zoom. I haven't left my house. I haven't been to campus. This is my life now.
Gosh. All right.
I'm grateful, just like the two of you. I'm grateful for for the time I have to spend with students. So
yeah, well, it's a ministry. Like teaching is the same. That's what I do a lot too. So,
and Spencer, I identify with what you said about faith. There are times when I've gone into the Richmond City Jail and I didn't know if I would have the words, and to help ask people to share their stories, and for my own witnessing to what they've been through and where they're trying to get in life, especially in the early days. I felt myself shaking in a lot of the same ways you described yourself, uncertain, feeling, why am I here? What am I supposed to do next? And then just praying that the words would come.
Well, that's an amazing ministry that you do in the prisons. I mean, my hat is off to you. That's a whole nother. That's amazing.
Okay, final thing. Show us Mr. Coconut.
Oh, okay. Here he comes. Coco. I'm so glad you remembered, because he likes being seen.
He does. Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah.
He looks great.
He is
Mr. Coconut. You're famous. All right, everybody. Well, on that note, have a beautiful, beautiful Thursday night, a beautiful weekend. So glad that you're here. We'll be back next week. We will have Sonia Livingston with us, and that's a colleague of Dave's. So it should be a rich conversation. Take care of each other and take care of yourselves.
Thank you so much. God bless.
God
And anyone can pop back on at any time because it's not closed.
Okay, and we're recording still.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah.